Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of A&R Conversations Between Malaysian Youths. This is actually a mini episode. It's not our fourth episode just yet. And what Adi and I planned on doing with these mini episodes is that we are going to be talking about different things outside of the Malaysian context, whether it be politics, society, or the economy. So, all under the banner of political discussion and public discourse. We'll be focusing on the Singapore General Elections today, one which will be happening on the 10th of July.
Yeah, as Ryan mentioned, this will be a mini episode that will just be focusing on things that are of general interest to us. It doesn't have to necessarily be about Malaysian politics, and we hope to condense this into bite-sized episodes, which are about maybe 20 to 25 minutes long. But yeah, today we'll be focusing on the Singapore General Elections, and today with us we have a special guest, Joshua Ng. He is a Singaporean who is also traveling back home to vote for the general elections. So today we're going to be asking for his opinions and try to dig deeper as to what we can understand from the Singaporean context. And hopefully, as Ryan and I, being responsible Malaysian citizens, hopefully we can apply those lessons to strengthening our own institutions or cultivating our own mature democracy. So Joshua, would you like to give a brief introduction of yourself?
Thanks, Ryan and Adi, for having me on the show. So as Adi has mentioned, my name is Joshua, and I'm 23 this year. I'm a first-time voter, and I've been actually keeping track of Singapore politics since 2011. It was actually this interest that got me into what I'm studying today, which is international relations at Nottingham, Malaysia.
Right. Coming from a Malaysian background, I'm not really too familiar on Singaporean politics. I was just watching the other day the live debate between the main parties fielding the most candidates, and mostly I was just picking off the Singaporean context from there. And it seems that there's still a lot of reservations for the opposition parties in doubting the capability of the People's Action Party. And so I would like to ask Joshua, what do you think about the whole political scenario, the context of the Singaporean political sphere right now? What do you feel is the growing trends coming out of the Singaporean population right now?
Okay, so Adi, that's actually quite a broad question, but nevertheless, I think the general trend has been rising popularity of the opposition within the political context. Of course, whether this is merited or is it dissatisfaction with PAP's policies is another question. In general, I feel that people are quite confident in the PAP's leadership. There has not been any major cases of corruption. People generally agree that the party has been very efficient and very effective in its governance. But I think the young are not as attached to the PAP of old. Older people tend to be loyal in a way because of how it's seen. The PAP has been seen to have brought us from the third world to first, as they like to say. And young people are also more exposed to the internet, so they get more diverse perspectives, maybe outside of Singapore. So I think in general, young people are more willing to consider the opposition, but it still remains whether we think that this opposition is credible enough, whether their credentials are solid enough, and whether they can be constructive in Parliament. Yeah.
Well, I guess in a society that has been built upon the ideal of meritocracy, ensuring that you work your way up to the top, it's no wonder that we see, like you said, the only reason why the PAP is strong is not because of the weak opposition, it's because they are that good. That's why they have always managed to stay up on top and always managed to retain their supermajority in Parliament. But I would like to pull back to to when you touched upon the opposition foothold in Singapore. Well, we know that the opposition in Singapore, they aren't lackluster. They are also well prepared, and we have seen ever since 1984 general election with Mr. Cham Si Tong coming in for the SDA, how he has established that alongside the Workers' Party with Mr. Lau Tia Kiang. Why is it that Singaporeans still vote for the PAP despite knowing that they're going to win anyways?
So there are actually several layers in order to answer that question. Uh, I believe since 2011, the PAP has always emphasized on the need for them to have a strong mandate in order to effectively govern. And they tie this to all kinds of things like social stability, economic stability, investor confidence, for example. So, because of that, people are convinced that it is the PAP's predominance that provides that sense of stability and security in order for us to continue in our prosperity. Whether that is true, the opposition itself has debated that numerous times, and even just today, the WP has also stated that countries like New Zealand, Taiwan, the ruling party in New Zealand, for example, doesn't have a majority, but is still able to govern. And in fact, during the COVID crisis, it's been able to hold its own just as well. So whether or not what the PAP has said about a strong mandate is true is again up for debate. However, in terms of why Singaporeans have not really given the opposition support, on top of this PAP's argument, there is also the matter of confidence on the ground. So when you talk about Mr. Cham Sitong, he was one of the long-standing opposition MPs in the single-member constituency of Potong Pasir. People generally seem to realize that the estate was not as well treated by the government in terms of funding. It's a sense of perception, basically, that if you are in an opposition ward, you may not get lift upgrading, estate maintenance as quickly or as efficiently as you would in a PAP ward. I think this has changed in recent times because as more and more wards like Hougang, SMC, and our Aljunied group member constituency, group representative constituency, have come into the Workers' Party fold, people have generally seemed to realize that, even if we vote for opposition, they're still able to take care of the estate reasonably well. Municipal issues are generally still addressed, but the stigma is still there. So it's really the opposition's job to try and convince people that they are able to handle the municipal issues just as they desire to speak up on a national level.
Yes, I do agree with your point. But pulling back to the Workers' Party and their reach across Singapore as to how they've won the Aljunied GRC in 2011, as well as keeping a strong foothold in Hougang SMC. Do you see the possibility of the Workers' Party taking on a much bigger role in this general election than the previous ones? What are your thoughts on the Workers' Party?
As someone who has watched the elections since 2011, and really, I guess that's really only two since this one. But even during this short span of time of a decade, the Workers' Party, I feel, has made leaps and strides, and it's by far the most prominent and perhaps even the most credible opposition party for this election. And I'm sure plenty of Singaporeans will agree with me on that account. It's not just because of their ability to organize social media campaigns this election, and that's particularly notable for one more reason, which is that every rallies are being held online and due to the COVID-19 situation. But that aside, their manifesto has also been very comprehensive. In some ways, people have pointed out that they've enumerated on their policies more thoroughly than perhaps even the PAP. They've introduced a very credible slate of candidates this time. They chose not to actually field as many candidates as they did in 2015. So it kind of speaks for the idea that they want quality and not quantity in this election. In fact, one of the newer political parties, the Progress Singapore Party, has fielded more candidates than the Workers' Party this election. But nevertheless, WP's candidates have risen to national prominence in this election, particularly one economist with an 11-page CV, whose name is Dr. James Lim. And during the debate that Adi spoke about just now, he actually made quite an impact. So in terms of public confidence in the opposition, I would feel that this is actually one of the highest rates of confidence that the Singaporean public has ever felt about a particular opposition party. Perhaps not to the point where we would want them to take over the reins of power, but certainly that we may be able to consider them as a constructive force in Parliament and in the opposition.
Yeah, but going back on to the trends and the debate that I saw the other day, it seems that the Singapore Democratic Party representative was Chee Soon Juan, who was very fired up on issues of foreign PMETs, professionals, managers, executives, technicians, foreigners coming into Singapore. And that was the central topic of the debate at the time. And there was really strong sentiments regarding foreign workers, especially when the accusation was made to the PMP that they were intending to raise the foreign population to a number where the SDP representative said was untenable, and was in some way was a very charged and loaded statement which the PAP representative Vivian Balakrishnan defended very vigorously. Think that is this a sort of rhetorical tactic by the SDP, or is there some kind of grounded truth or why these kinds of sentiments would appear amongst this kind of party?
All right, so Adi, to answer your question, Chee Soon Juan was really channeling, I think, the dissatisfaction that a lot of PMETs and a lot of Singaporeans have felt. I don't really want to comment on whether this dissatisfaction is justified and whether or not, because there are actually many layers to this unhappiness, and not least stemming from the fact that some of these Singaporeans perceive that their jobs have been taken away from them by competing foreign professionals. The PAP has said that this is really not the case, that they are prioritizing Singaporeans in the employment, the area of employment. And they've also come out with the government agency for the protection from online falsehoods and manipulation, or POFMA, has also stated that Chee Soon Juan's statement that the government was aiming for a 10 million population is false. I myself have gone to the interview I myself have went and read the interview that Chee Soon Juan referred to when he accused the government of this. And honestly, I don't actually think that the government was trying to say that they were actively going to aim for 10 million population, rather that they were planning for possible eventuality, which is obviously, inevitable population growth. But nevertheless, I think the government has to handle this situation quite tactfully. In 2011, the idea of foreign talent coming in to steal jobs, especially due to economic instability, was a huge reason for the PAP's relative loss in popularity. They received their lowest vote share in that election. So this election, the SDP under Chee Soon Juan has continued this narrative somewhat, and other fringe parties like the People's Voice Party under Lim Tian has also contributed to this conversation. I think it is we have to be very careful also not to degenerate into a kind of xenophobic sentiment. I mean, at the end of the day, whether or not the foreign professionals are here due to government policy, they are here mainly because they want to provide for their families. If the opposition wants to blame anyone, I think the conversation has to be centered around the government itself.
So we've not actually talked about the new party led by Dr. Tan Chim Bok that will be contesting in this election, and I think this will be a good segue for us to talk about the key battleground states that we should be focusing on in this upcoming general election for Singapore. In relation to Dr. Tan Chim Bok and his team, he will be contesting in the West Coast GRC. And this is to what I will believe to be a battleground state for the upcoming Progress Singapore Party. This, alongside East Coast GRC, which we see the promising Nicosia from the Workers' Party coming into the fold, contesting in her second general election. Do you think the PSP has a chance in winning at least the seat in SMC/GRC in this election?
So you raise an interesting point. As you probably know, the PSP is a very new party. I believe it was only convened end of last year, I think, if I'm not wrong. In terms of likelihood of winning any of the constituencies that it's fielded candidates in, of course, like you mentioned, West Coast is is the most likely in my mind, because Tan Chim Bok himself is running in that constituency. Not only that, his old constituency as a PAP MP, which is Ayer Rajah SMC, has been merged into West Coast. So that means there may be a group of residents who recall him from his time as a PAP MP. And bear in mind that he was an MP until 2006. So there has been about 14 years for the demographics to change. Whether or not the residents there still remember him, whether or not the whole of West Coast will be more inclined to see him as a credible candidate remains to be seen. I think notably his PAP challenges are not insignificant as well. We have the Communications Minister S. Iswaran. So he has been a West Coast MP since 1997, and he's running again this time. Not only that, he's backed by another minister, Desmond Lim, who is running alongside him this election. So Tan Chim Bok has his work cut out for him. I know he's expressed a lot of confidence that in his chances. And indeed, I think out of all the constituencies that PSP has fielded candidates in, this will be its highest, most likely chance of gaining seats in the House.
All right. So before we would like to wrap up, I would like to ask one more question on the predictions of the Singapore election, because from what I've noticed, Jem Muslim, he stated that they are trying to only deny the PAP a blank check, and that PAP does not hold a monopoly of wisdom, which is, I guess he's implying that he would like to ferment more stronger debate and stronger policies which are comprehensive, and it was set in a conducive environment where every representative was consulted on. So it seems that there is from what I can tell, there is this level of acceptance that the PAP is going to win the general election, although that's really up to the polls at the end of the day. But I think from what I can see is that it's a trend of more strengthening the opposition numbers to help more accountability for the PAP. What are your thoughts or predictions for this general election, Joshua?
So besides the Workers' Party, the Progress Singapore Party, led by an ex-PAP MP, Tan Chim Bok, has gone further and stated that it wants to deny the People's Action Party supermajority in Parliament. And as we understand, supermajority would imply that the PAP basically can amend the constitution without consulting the opposition. And so the position of the PSP is that they want to prevent the PAP from being able to make unilateral decisions. And in general, The WP has also a similar train of thought, but I think they're trying not to be as ambitious this election season, and they just want to ensure greater opposition representation without really going into the whole idea of denying a supermajority. My prediction, honestly, is that Singaporeans generally value safety and security, and we've had both of these in large quantity under the PAP. That has not really changed much, although now there is more discussion about minority representation, the future of our economy and jobs, which both the PAP and the opposition have been striving to address. In terms of predictions, I think the two opposition parties that will probably come out stronger in this election are the Progress Singapore Party that I mentioned, as well as the Workers' Party. Progress Singapore Party mainly because of Dr. Tan Jeng Bok's reputation as an ex-MP and also as a candidate in the presidential election of 3 or 4 years ago, I believe. And he seemed to be quite a genuine and constructive character. As for the Workers' Party, I think the tact or their strategy has shifted significantly since 2011 and 2015. And so they presented themselves as a very credible and constructive party, as opposed to, let's say, making a lot of noise for no reason, which is what the PAP used to like to portray the opposition as. But I think my prediction is also subject to the results after polling day, because I feel like PSP is somewhat overly reliant on Tan Jeng Bok's reputation, and if he doesn't win, it will cast a shadow on the party's viability in the coming years. As for the Workers' Party, honestly, I think they are looking into the future. They literally just renewed their entire party leadership. So in that sense, I think it gives voters confidence that it is not just the PAP that has the long term in mind.
All right, and with that, we are almost out of time, so we're just going to head into our closing remarks. I would just like to thank Joshua for giving us his time to be able to give us and comment his opinions on this whole matter. Hopefully, we can do a follow-up episode in the future to be able to analyze what were the results of the Singapore General Elections. But other than that, this is just a short episode that we'll just want to cover on certain things that are of interest to us. Maybe in the future we'll cover other things such as not just Singapore, maybe other things that are related to maybe geopolitics or the Southeast Asian region or any other issues really that's just interesting to me and Ryan, and probably get some more guest speakers on the way. But other than that, I would just like to thank the audience for tuning in. Our regular episodes will also be coming out. The next one shall be released on the 18th of July, so we're looking forward to that. We're going to have a really, really special episode for that time, so please stay tuned in.
I think those were pretty great insights given by Joshua on the current situation on the ground in Singapore, especially in the lead up to the general elections this coming Friday. Just like to thank Joshua for his time, and hopefully whatever he said, his predictions does come true, because I for one am a great supporter of a greater public discourse and greater I would say opposition participation in any parliament or in any democracy.
Thanks, Ryan, for that. Actually, that's very much in line with my train of thought, and I know that this may not be necessarily something that some segments of Singapore society might agree with, but I do think that in general we would benefit from more voices, more alternative perspectives in Parliament. There is no denying that the PAP has done a magnificent job, but there are gaps that remain to be filled, and so I hope that the Singaporean voters will reflect the necessity of having more innovation and more ideas in the parliamentary setting. As Jamus Lim has already so famously put it, the PAP does not have monopoly on good ideas. I know I'm generally speaking to a Malaysian audience here, but honestly, I think both our countries benefit from a free exchange of ideas. I would highly encourage young Malaysians and maybe Malaysians in general to take interest in your your neighbor's politics, and perhaps we can learn something from each other along the way.
Perfect ending, Joshua. I agree 100%. I think it's good that we learn the lessons from our neighbor in Singapore so that we can add value to our own democracies as well. Because we are never in a vacuum. We always have to learn from others and synthesize what they have proposed. And I believe we can learn a lot from Singapore. And I hope vice versa as well. With that, I would like to say thank the audience for tuning in, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you so much.